Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeffrey Moss from Parker Dewey. Thanks so much for joining us for this session on student voices. I could not be any more excited about this. I think COVID has presented so many challenges for students and companies tied to campus recruiting. And we've all been hearing from the industry experts on what they should or should not be doing, how to make your career fair presentations compelling, what student groups you should be emailing, what is the right message. Well, as we've seen over the past year, many of these efforts just aren't working. Students aren't registering or showing up for events unless they're already planning to apply. Diversity and inclusion numbers aren't achieving the goals of so many organizations. And there's a ton of concerns about lower start rates and retention rates. And some of this certainly has to do with the fact that so many companies are essentially using the same processes. We were curious if there was something more. So last summer and again this winter, we asked the students, since that's really who the companies are trying to engage more effectively. And while the data from the students showed while these efforts aren't achieving expectations, we wanted to invite 3 students and recent grads to share their personal experiences with the hope that these insights would help companies and other students alike. So that's enough talking for me. Who you really want to hear from are these amazing students. So with that, I'm really proud to introduce Adila, Yashin, and Legend. And real quickly, I'm going to ask everyone to just give very, very brief background on sort of where you went to school or go to school, your major, your graduation date, and what you're either going to be doing now that you started the job or want to start or expecting to start soon. So Adila, since you're at the top of my screen, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. My name is Adila Gathers. I went to school at Niagara University, and there I got my undergrad, so my bachelor's in sports management, and I minored in sign language. And then I continued my education there, and I got my MBA in strategic management and human resource management in 2019. And then after that, I thought that I was going to become the best, WNBA player out there, but I ended up just playing overseas in Puerto Rico for a year, and then got a gig for Games Changers through the Parker Dewey system, and now I am a data analyst at Sports Innovation Labs.
Congratulations. And I'm sure your basketball skills are significantly better than mine. Yashin, since you're next on my panel, would love to learn a little bit more about you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Yashin Lee. I graduated from UC Berkeley last spring with a degree in econ. I'm currently interning at an accounting firm called Novogradac in the San Francisco Bay Area within their audit practice, and then I'll be joining Deloitte in the fall also within audit.
Congratulations. What great opportunities.
Thank you.
And last and certainly not least, Legend.
Hi, everyone. My name is Legend, and I'm currently a senior at Johns Hopkins University studying economics. And I'll actually graduate not this spring, but in December of 2021. And currently what I'm doing right now is I'm currently doing a couple projects. One, I'm working with Venturel, a very early stage startup, kind of doing some outbound stuff for them. So I'm very excited about that. And I also, after graduation, I plan on going into the tech industry, specifically doing sales and business development.
Very cool. And again, having gotten to know all 3 of you a bit over the past period of time, again, just a huge honor to have you all here. So thank you. Adila, we'll start with you. So when you think about the job search process, what was it that you were really hoping to get out of it beyond the WNBA contract when you realized sort of professional basketball wasn't going to be the long-term future?
So that's a great question. Every athlete never wants to see the day when you're not going to be an athlete anymore, but it came a little bit unexpected due to COVID. So I had to go back into the job search pool and look around and see just where is it that my experience will correlate. And through this whole experience entirely, it's been a rough one, but definitely just going in and seeing like, hey, is this going to be a perfect fit? I kind of look at it as like recruiting wise, you want to make sure that the university that you're going to is going to fit you, everything that you're looking for, which what I was looking for was just healthcare at the time and health insurance. And so anything in that aspect of things, and then just making sure that I had a voice at wherever I went and was able to talk and feel comfortable within the environment.
Yashin, Adila talked a little bit about trying to find the right fit and doing a little bit of career exploration. Did you find that challenge as well, given your major, or did you feel like you had a little bit more certainty?
Absolutely. I relate to a lot of what Adila said too. The public accounting industry recruits really early on. So generally, like for junior internships, you would be interviewing in sophomore year, maybe like fall semester or early spring. And so that's still very early in my career, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I attended a lot of info sessions and went to career fairs to try to get a better understanding of what the day-to-day was like, as well as the different company cultures. I felt like through those processes alone, I never really was able to get a good understanding of the company, and I tried to do a lot of research on my own. And it wasn't until I was able to do other programs like exploratory programs or internships with those companies that I actually felt like I had a better understanding.
Well, that's super. I mean, that's really interesting because the data shows I think it's like 55% of recent college grads leave their first job in the first year. Do you feel like that opportunity to do that exploration before taking the full-time role with Deloitte sort of makes you more confident in that, and it sort of gives you comfort that it truly is the right place for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I was deciding on full-time positions, that was a big factor in my decision. Like, which company did I feel more connected to? And it was usually like the company that I had been more involved with early on. So in sophomore year, I not only went to their exploratory program, which is like a 1 to 3 day in-office visit, essentially, where you get to see the company in their own space, as well as talk to some of the professionals there. Deloitte also had a case competition, so that was really the closest thing that we could do to, get a sense of the work without actually working at the company. So those were two of the big reasons why I chose them in the end.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Legend, since you're still in the process, sort of about what 9, 10 months away from graduation, what are you looking for in that career exploration process?
Well, that's a great question. I would say I'm looking for first and foremost is transparency. Um, I think um, I think during being in a remote setting can be very hard. But one thing that I preach personally, and with anybody I work with, or just even communicating with friends, just over communication. And so I think transparency through the whole life cycle of the hiring process. I think that's what I'm looking for in career exploration. And I would say a culture fit. Most importantly, I'm looking for what I'm currently looking for is to work somewhere to where I'm just very comfortable to where I feel that I can collaborate, contribute really well, and I feel like that my voice is being heard. But I would say most importantly is transparency because I feel like if you can show that in the front end, I think that pretty much just sets the tone with whether the candidate is going to be interested in working with you or not.
Did Have you had any difficulty so far getting in the door at companies, or have any of you had difficulty getting in the door at companies either because of major GPA or where you attended school? I mean, all three of you attended amazing programs, so I just wasn't sure.
Um, I personally for me, I would say I've had a tough time. I would say early on because I was very conscious of my GPA because I struggled my first 2 years in college, and I'm very transparent about that in interviews. And but also at the same time, I had an experience to where my actually last year, my junior year, I was talking to a very big firm for their finance internship, and I told him the recruiter up front. I said I have a 2.7 GPA, and like a week later, they offered me the internship. I actually was thinking about taking it, but I ended up not. And then due to everything, it actually turned out it wasn't probably the best for me to take it. But from that point, it made me realize that not everybody necessarily looks at GPA, but there's still some people that really emphasize that. Like, 'cause, like I'm an econ major, so a lot of people, a lot of my peers go into finance and consulting, and they still put they kind of they still put GPA probably at or maybe ahead a little bit of skill set. And so, but I think realizing that I have to expand my skill set even more, I think that's what made me realize.
Adila and Yashin, any thoughts on that? Did you ever feel like there was difficulty getting in the door?
I definitely had an experience like that. Having an MBA, you feel like you can go in and knock down any door. Um, but a couple of like run-ins that I came across was that employers looked at my resume and was just like, even though you do have this degree, where do you have the relevant experience? And through college, being a student athlete, they tell you that, employers are going to love the fact that you're a student athlete. They're going to want you to be on their team because they know that you're going to be coachable, you're going to be a team player, you're going to be able um, to be adaptable at any time during any period. So I didn't really look into, I guess, stacking my resume with all of those internships at that time. So I didn't really have that relevant experience besides playing overseas, being a leader on the team. So running into that and then saying, like, okay, well, I have an MBA. So why is it that my experience trumps my education? So that's what.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting because again, to your point, companies talk about the importance of core skills, the communication, problem solving, teamwork, grit, which so many student athletes have. Like they've demonstrated them on and off the court, but wind up oftentimes getting filtered out because of GPA or lack of work experience or the like. So it's interesting to watch. Yashin, you talked a little bit about the incredible Deloitte programs that they ran that both gave you the experiences and the exposure to the organization. What else did you see during your process, whether it was with Deloitte or others, that was really, really good, or where you thought there were opportunities for improvements? And again, you don't have to give any other organizations names, especially if they're opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, I would say that for Deloitte and a lot of more of the memorable events that I've been to, one common theme between all of them is that they also had, like, in addition to a really passionate recruiting team, they also had extremely involved employees as well, where they paired people up with professionals at the company, or these professionals would also attend these events to talk about their experiences and talk to college students. I felt like having that very involved, having employees and professionals come to these events as well spoke a lot more to the culture than just like a slide on a presentation at an info session would. I was able to actually see that in practice. And so being able to talk to them as well as a passionate recruiting team was a lot more memorable for me. I think it's definitely a lot more work from a recruiting standpoint, but in the end, I think that it definitely pays off, and it's a lot easier for me to build a relationship with the people at that company long term.
I mean, that's so important. So the people that you're talking about, they were not the campus recruiters or recruiting teams, but you're talking about actual hiring managers and other professionals. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Because those are the people who I actually learned a lot about their day-to-day work from. The recruiters were really helpful for helping me navigate the process of applying and like understanding the timeline, making sure I hit those deadlines. But I also really wanted to understand like what was a professional at this company doing in their day-to-day that I couldn't just read online.
No, it makes total sense. Adila, Yashin said something that was interesting that I think your quote, and again, Yashin, tell me if I got it wrong, was that it's a lot more work to get hiring managers involved. Um, Adila, given your involvement with games, with Gigs for Game Changers, did you feel like it was more work for the hiring managers that you were working with through that program?
So I had a unique experience because I was on the back end of that whole partnership with Parker Dewey. So I was both on the side of getting and helping the Winning Edge get people to engage, getting companies to engage. Um, and you probably came across the same type of questions that they were asking, is like, how do we relate? How do we get such an beneficial experience within such a short amount of time, and what's the payoff for both people? And then, like, on my side of things, that engagement just was, I guess you could say, it was the same hesitancy, trying to figure out, like, okay, will this be worth it at the end of it? I know it's a small task that they might be asking, but will this correlate? Will this experience actually show up on my resume and be worth an employer's look, I guess you could say?
And Legend, you've worked on a bunch of these micro internships with different companies, and again, gotten the type of engagement with employers as well. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think that the employers that you were doing, or the hiring managers for whom you were doing the projects, did you feel like it was creating more work for them, or was it making their lives easier?
I feel like it was really making their lives easier. And personally, for me, I think what stood out to me about the companies that I worked with and their hiring managers, or the just onboarding process, was it seemed more seamless. I felt like when by working with Parker Dewey and applying to the micro internships, I felt like just the onboarding process, it caused less barrier, and it was just less awkwardness. And I think I was able to see their expectations really sooner. And so one thing that helped me when I would talk to the hiring manager, or to the person that was hiring me, is I would just ask them just what their expectations are. And I think being able to meet them halfway, I think it just made both of our jobs easier. And once I got into it, I just really made sure that I communicated as well. But I think being able to lower that barrier is very important. I think that by working with these other companies, I think I was able to see that.
No, and I think again, it goes back to something Yashin said, which is, how do you find ways to create engagement or relationships between hiring managers and students that are authentic and real, and do so in a way that doesn't create additional burdens for both sides? And that's really the trick. Legend, is a follow-up. Again, given you're going through the process right now to some extent as a current student, um, what what could be better? What else could companies, or should companies be doing to get to know amazing students like you as part of their process?
Oh man, I've been thinking about this a lot, like the last couple weeks. I'll give a perfect example. For example, I'm currently interviewing in the interviewing process with a very big tech company, and one thing I really like about the recruiting manager that I'm about to talk to Friday is what he does in his emails. He has a link to where the candidate can basically give him feedback of how the interview process can be better. So I think being able to accept, like, really collect data and accept that feedback on the front end is very important. I think being able to do that is really a good way to really understand what they need to do better, because I feel like sometimes with the recruiting process, I feel like sometimes companies are kind of like basically what I like to say, throwing paint on the wall, expected to cover the room. and
Yeah.
they pretty much expect the student to be engaged, and basically when they say, well, we'll get back to you, get back in touch. And unfortunately, I've had those experiences to where they never get back to you, or they just don't really tell you that you didn't get picked. So I think being able to get that get that trans get it goes back to transparency, and get that engagement up front and collect that data, and so talking about what they can do better. I think that's very vital.
Oh yeah. Well, and it all comes back to, again, the authenticity. How do you build these authentic relationships between the
Absolutely.
students and the companies? Adila, any thoughts on that? Like where could they have been doing things better, and what was really good about the processes that you saw, again, especially as a student athlete?
Hmm. So during my time, I didn't see a lot, but I am starting to see it a lot more that I did re-dive into um, the job search. I think that where companies can get better in this department is like what Legend said, just being more transparent up front, showing us what the company is, who they are, what they want us to be within their company, um, is something that I guess recruiters are or interviewers are waiting for you to ask that question. But I think it should be a forefront of what they want from to let us know in that interview is saying like, so this is the position that you're interviewing for, but this is what we see through your experiences, through your resume, and make it more of like a personal experience. I know, sorry, companies that's saying that you might have to do a little bit more work on the front end, but I think it will really help with making them feel more comfortable and being transparent.
Well, I'm not, yeah, and by the way, I'm not sure they actually need to do more work. I think for a lot of companies, there's opportunities to do that actually pull the hiring managers into the process earlier and make their lives easier. But again, I'm a little bit biased on that topic, is you all know, and probably the folks on the panel on the webinar know. Um, Yashin, you're working for one of the most, or going to be starting with one of the most well-known brands out there, especially for college students, one of the companies that recruits more college students than just about anyone else. Um, Deloitte obviously doesn't have a brand issue. Was Deloitte a company you were planning to apply to before the process even began?
I would say that I didn't know about Deloitte or any of the other big accounting firms until maybe pretty late in sophomore year, actually, which is when I started applying
Oh,
to
interesting.
all these programs. I definitely didn't know about it in freshman year at all. And so it was mainly through, I guess, like seeing their name in a bunch of info sessions all the time, like that allowed it to be top of mind when I was like looking into different companies to apply to. I would say that I was also a part of a business club that's pretty heavily focused on helping our members recruit. And so some of our members are and alum are through are at Deloitte, and they have good relationships with the recruiting team. And so that's another way I found out about it.
So it was very much that early access, getting to know them freshman, sophomore year, and the awareness.
Yeah, that's what I would say is a pretty useful part of going to all these info sessions. It wasn't necessarily like getting to know the company very well, but it was being able to remember like, oh, I can expect Deloitte or these other companies to come every fall semester around this time. And I'll plan to go to their info sessions and apply to their programs and get my resume ready. So it was about being able to plan around a
Uh-huh.
consistent timeline.
No, and that's important. And what's interesting is also that was sort of the pre-COVID world, pre sort of remote info sessions, pre tons of emails, or at least the same level. I guess the follow-up to that is, with all of these companies spending so much time and money trying to engage the students, again, through the emails, through the messaging, to drive that first awareness, to get you to show up to the info session, to get you to show up to the webinar. Like, was that working as well as you expected, and did you see changes over your academic career, or did you find that you were engaging with companies where you already knew them?
I think that some of the ways, at least from my perspective, they seem like very expensive marketing techniques. So, for example, when recruiters reach out through email on Handshake, that's something I see a lot, but I generally don't really respond to those or interact with those because it's not it's not super personal. It's not as personal as it sounds. And also generally on Handshake, if they're emailing me, I would be applying to a company that I've already thought about applying to, or I might respond to somebody who I already know I'm interested in reaching out to. So it's not really a way for me to find new opportunities or new career paths.
What about you, Legend? I mean, again, you're in the thick of it right now in the COVID world. Like, are you finding that you're responding or engaging to those emails or texts? And what are your thoughts about some of those efforts?
Man, what Yashin just said really resonated with me. I still receive a lot of those handshake emails myself, but they're not really as personalized as I would like. Sometimes whenever I see them, I just wonder, did you really read my profile, or you just saw that I was an economics major? And so I definitely think they need to be more personalized with their approach. And I understand that they have a lot of um, a lot of candidates that they're definitely looking for. But I think just being more personalized, I think would really help, because sometimes um I'm probably not the only one that feel like this. When I read that email, I just wonder, did you really take time to know me? And I feel like if I feel like that right now, and I haven't even engaged with you, um, if I do work with you, I'm probably not going to have the best time of my life. So I just feel like being more just being more personalized, and kind of they say research the company, but actually a lot of us are researching them. So I would say have somebody, or just try to get to know me a little bit. And I think that's what can really help with the interviewing process as well, because a lot of it is kind of like it's like you're going through a gauntlet instead of just having a genuine conversation. And I'm the type of person I just like genuine conversations. So I think that can really help a lot with that.
Yeah. No, and by the way, I agree with you. And again, as we hear from from the university recruiters and other talent acquisition HR professionals, I mean, they're trying to figure it out also real time, because they want to make sure that as many students as possible know the company, know the opportunities, are engaging. But ironically, there's some of these unintended consequences by not by not taking it personally. You're sort of sending out the broad group, but unless Yashin or Legend or Adil is already planning to apply or already aware of the company, it may not have the impact. Adila, there's been a lot of discussion around info sessions and career fairs. Um, did you find any unique challenges tied to those as a student athlete?
I did actually. On campus, I had a lot of problems that when I ran into either practice time or class. So I would have to get excused. But in that, I was already missing classes for events, like sporting events. So to then miss class again to go to a career fair that they may or may not look again at my resume and say, oh, you don't have any experience, and it'd be like, okay, cool, thank you, let's move on. I got lucky and was introduced to the Winning Edge, which I know we've been talking about it, but it is a professional development leadership group for minorities and women in sports. And they were the people that actually helped me get into all of this professional development and making sure that I was sitting in front of industry professionals that not only looked like me, but were in sports. And that's where I thought that my career was going to go. So they helped me more so narrow down my focus instead of getting all of these emails and notifications on Handshake. It was more personalized in saying that this is what I want to do. And then they introduced you to what they had in their network.
No, and by the way, huge shout out to Winning Edge. I am just a huge fan, and what the team there has done for diverse student athletes is nothing short of incredible. Again, really creating these equitable pathways. And it's shocking that that it needs to be done the way it is, with so many companies saying we want to drive diversity and we want to drive inclusion, and we value what student athletes bring to the table. The fact that so many student athletes are still being ignored in the process and missed. So again, huge shout out to Winning Edge. You also talked about something that was interesting about being at the table with individuals with backgrounds similar to your own. Did other than the work with Winning Edge, like, did you find that was difficult in the process? And I'll put that out to all three of you, but Adila, since you're off mute already, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I found that very difficult because as much as people say that, you know, athletes, that's going to be great to be an athlete, you're going to have all these opportunities. More so often I found out that there's a lot of people that weren't student athletes. They were those students that either were full-time or part-time. And then in my master's program, it was even more scarce. It was family members. It was people who were removed from college that came back. So being and seeing role models or examples that actually had the same path that I did, whether that be being a student athlete or whether that be within the sport that I played, so basketball, that was great for me entirely.
What about you, Legend? Sort of when you're talking with companies, did you ever feel like you were the only one at the table with a background similar to your own, or did you feel like companies were doing a good job sort of bringing people in with similar backgrounds?
That's a bit of a little question. I'll say
Sorry, I
it was.
wasn't trying to, I promise.
No, it's a great question. I've actually experienced, I've experienced a little bit of both, and I would say for me, um, I some of the companies I started interviewing with initially had people with backgrounds similar as mine, but personally for me, my interests has started really change, particularly in the last year. I always have this joke with a lot of my peers that everybody in my major wants to do DC or Wall Street. I want to do the Bay or Austin, Texas. So basically, like, I started developing more of an interest in tech. So, kind of from the outside looking in, if you have peers or family, they're kind of like they kind of still assume that you're going to go the finance track. But for me, like I said, I want to do tech. So I kind of had a bit of this like mix of like brief period of like an identity crisis, or kind of like sort of like an imposter syndrome since thing, to where I had this shift. So when I started to interview for some of those roles, I kind of felt out of the loop a little bit because it was like I'm very interested in sales, but I don't have much experience in that. But at the same time, I'm not as interested in the finance industry as maybe some of my peers. So what I personally did is I took it upon myself to reach out to alumni from my school who took econ, poli sci, or international studies, who were in the tech space. Matter of fact, there's a guy there's a guy that's one of the participants now. Colin O'Connor, who has so far has helped me so far with that. And so I think for me it was kind of a little bit of both. It was a little bit of both.
There's something I want to follow up with one second, but real quickly for those on the call, if you have questions that you want us to cover, make sure to ask along the way, please. I'm being told, please use the chat function or the Q&A, and we'll try to make sure the students have opportunities to answer these questions. Again, it's a great risk-free environment to get student feedback and student and recent grad perspective on some of your questions around campus recruiting. Legend, you said something I want to talk about real quickly. You talked about the fact you want to do tech, so that means you want to go to the Bay Area or Austin. Is it because you have a particular affinity for those regions? And if you do, great. And Yashin would probably agree with you since she's in the Bay Area. Is it an affinity for those areas, or is it just this assumption that to do interesting tech, you have to be in those regions?
No, it was kind of actually like it's a bit of a joke, but it's a bit of sort of like an affinity, sort of an affinity for those areas, and like there's many other areas in the country that having coming tech hubs like Indianapolis and Charlotte. So, but for me since I have more time before I graduate, I'm just starting to look at some places to where they have very a lot of growth in tech. And so that's currently what I'm doing right now.
Got it. Thank you. I just wanted to hit that because again, it's we hear that all the time from companies that we're
Right.
in a region that students aren't considering, or we don't have the brand name of a Google or an Amazon or a Deloitte. How do we how do we engage students and show them our brand or overcome preconceived biases that Pepsi is a soda company and they're not thinking about it for tech roles?
And I definitely would like to input on that real quick. I think actually I think actually being less being less well known, whether you're early stage startup or a nonprofit or any of these companies who are not as well known is actually can be an advantage because personally for me a lot a lot of my peers are still going after the Deloittes, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Microsoft, which don't get me wrong, that's great. And so what I personally for me, what I pre-COVID, what I noticed is with career fairs, I didn't really go to a lot to a lot of them because I wasn't a huge fan of kind of like the structure, the setup. But I noticed like whenever Google or Microsoft would be there, there would be like a huge line of students just with their resume in their hand. I thought that was very inefficient. So for personally me, I always kind of actually was drawn toward more the lesser known company. No, not because like the competition, but because not a lot of people are really talking about them. So I think you can attract a certain type of student um, if you're lesser well known because they're willing to dig more deeper into getting to know you because they may not they may shy away or they may not look at that bigger company. So I think that could be a
Oh yeah. Well, and that's been one of the areas that we've seen micro internships be very compelling, whether it's for less well-known companies or even big companies where students, again, may have preconceived notions. I'm working at Pepsi, but I'm not, or I know Pepsi as a soda brand, but I'm not necessarily thinking about it for a strategy or tech role. Or I know Chase is the bank down the street, but I'm not thinking about a tech role. I think I have to go work at some fintech startup out in Silicon Valley to go do interesting tech. So we're really seeing it. We're really seeing it both ways. Um, Yashin, I guess really all three of you, we got to know you because you've worked on micro internships and you've worked on these projects as students. In some cases, it's been for a long period of time. In some cases, it's more recently. Yashin, I'd love to hear a little bit more about like, why did you decide to work on a micro internship, especially whether it was before you accepted the role at Deloitte or after? Like, what was it about the projects?
Yeah, just to give some background on my micro internship, I was working for a nonprofit called WAVE, which is the Women's Association of Venture and Equity. And it's this community of women that's dedicated to helping provide career opportunities to other women interested in the finance space. And last year, or back in 2019, actually, I went to their annual career conference. And then in 2020, they were planning their next career conference again and were asking for ambassadors to come back and help. So that's kind of how I got involved with them initially. I had started helping out with planning back in maybe summer of last year, but it wasn't really formalized until November during my Parker Dewey micro internship with them. By then, I definitely already had my Deloitte offer because of just the very accelerated accounting recruiting timeline. But I would say that like just because I had that offer, my job search process and professional development never stops there. I was always looking for other opportunities and ways to continue developing and applying my skills, gaining new skills, and I thought that Parker Dewey was a great way to do that. I at first, thought this was just going to be a project where I could help out, apply some of my event planning skills that I've learned from my business club, and then hopefully be a little bit more connected to this community that I hopefully want to be more involved with in the future. But I was really happily surprised by truly how integrated I was into the team just through these short few weeks of doing a part-time internship. I was probably working 10, 15 hours a week maximum. And it's a nonprofit with, women in very successful careers. So this is not their day jobs. This was more just something that we would do like at night or work on after work. So it wasn't extremely intense, but I was still able to gain so much from the experience in terms of building genuine relationships with my managers and supervisors. And we've even talked about continuing my involvement this year. So even outside of a wave context, like they've been super open about telling me that they're happy to be a resource to me in any way that they can. And that's something that I definitely didn't expect initially from a short internship too.
No, that's awesome. And by the way, it ties back to something you said earlier about just like having these variety of experiences makes you even more confident that Deloitte's the right fit. So beyond the fact that you're building your network and getting experience and these valuable relationships, it's continuing to show you that, hey, I made the right decision by taking this full-time role with Deloitte. So again, huge kudos. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of Wave, as we talked about. For any organizations looking to get to know women interested in financial services or driving gender equity in financial services, Wave is just absolutely incredible. Huge fan. Adila, how did you get involved? I mean, you talked a little bit about your involvement through Gigs for Game Changers and Winning Edge, but like, why did you decide to actually get on the other side and work on these micro internships, and what was it about sort of the value that you got from them?
So everyone knows COVID hit. So there was a big pivot within just like my personal life and my work life. And so I had to figure out what is going to be the next thing that I do. No more basketball, no more. At the time I was working at a Marriott, so no more in person working. What is this going to look like? And then again, with the going through the interview process and having people say, okay, you have an MBA, but you don't have experience. I was trying to figure out, okay, where will I get this experience and in a quick way? And this is what popped up, yes, through Gigs for Game Changers, but then I also, looked at Parker Dewey on its own and saw that there are a lot of different places that I could go. So I started applying for many different things. And then ironically, yes, the Gigs for Game Changers one was the one that I got. And I ended up working for a data company within sports, which was good. That made me feel comfortable. And then I just went through that whole process of just making sure that, like, hey, even though I'm pivoting, these types of micro internships, Gigs for Game Changers, is a perfect transition into whether that be a new role or whether that be you just want to go and explore and see if you are capable of doing these types of things, or to see if the skills that you have are transferable to different types of projects that are out there for you.
No, and again, you're hitting something else that I think you alluded to earlier, that what your major is doesn't necessarily equate to what your job is, especially for those of us who have majors that don't sound like job titles. Like, how can you understand how these different roles translate, whether they're, again, formal things that you learned as an English major or history major or a Latin major, or those skills that you learned as a student athlete, or Yashin, in your case, as someone involved with student organizations, how can they translate to professional roles? So again, thanks so much for highlighting that. Legend, I know you've worked on a number of different micro internships over the past, I guess, a year or so. What were some of the ones that were really interesting to you or compelling? Obviously, without disclosing the company's name or anything confidential, like what were some of the ones that were most interesting, and what was it that made them interesting, or did you get out of them?
I think the most interesting about them is the opportunity to really gain direction on what I wanted to do. I think micro internships were very instrumental in gaining direction of what I really wanted to do after graduation in the last few months. And I would say one that I would like to begin with is a cloud services company. And I was doing basically some data cleanup for them, and also calling existing leads for them. And was it actually really gave me a glimpse into to see what I was going to do for my first job. Like for example, for sales, I'm going to do either be a BDR or SDR, and so I'm going to have to do like, a lot of calls and um, follow up with leads. So really being able to do that, and what I noticed is I really started really getting to the job. I remember there were a couple days where I would reach out to my team that I was working with, and I'm just like, they didn't call, the contact didn't call today. What should I do to what should I do? And I started kind of get a little, so I really started like really get passion to it, even though it was like only 2 weeks. It was only 2 weeks of work, and I was saying what I'm currently working with right now. I think it's really allowed me to really see the different stages of companies, like one that's just starting or one that's really already established, and really to see how much I could contribute, and being able to really gain those skills early on. And Like for example, as time went on, I realized I was like, I want to work at this type of company. I want to in doing this, and so being able to do that now, even as a college student, I think it's amazing, and I really I'm really thankful for the micro internships, and I'm really looking forward to doing some more as the year goes on.
No, thank you. And again, students like all three of you, or recent grads like all three of you, are exactly why we started this. Um, a question or a comment came up before about the fact that you felt like you felt like you were able to get a lot of value, even though it was a short-term experience. Yashin, I think you were the one who said that first, but all three of you have touched on it. Um, did you feel like it was difficult to get started? Like, was there a whole bunch of onboarding required? Did it feel like it was a whole bunch of work for the company that was working with you? Any feedback on that? And Yashin, I'll start with you on that.
Definitely not. I started with a 15 to 20-minute phone call with my manager. She already had in mind a clear idea of what exactly I would start with. And so we went over that during the first call, and then basically we continued every week by having a 1 hour phone call just to catch up on what kind of new initiatives we had, and also the work that's been done. Throughout the week, we were obviously emailing frequently, but I would say that in terms of onboarding, there wasn't a whole lot. On this topic, though, I think that what I really liked about these short-term internships is that they're heavily based around a project or a need that the company or nonprofit has. And so inherently, like, there is going to be work for me to do. I think that in some cases, like, this is a much better internship than a longer term internship that somebody might have over the entire summer, because during the summer, if it's a scheduled internship program, the manager may or may not have a pressing need for a project. Whereas for a Parker Dewey internship, you know that you're going to be thrown into the work, which is exactly what we want to do. We're here to learn and also provide value to the companies. And that's why I think that being in a faster paced internship is great for learning about the company and also exploring career paths.
Legend, did you feel like it was hard for you to get onboarded, or difficult for any of the companies you worked with? Because you worked with, again, a number of them.
Not at all. Every company that I've worked with, it was a very seamless experience. Like Yashin said, it was a 15 to 20-minute call. What I also liked about it was they stayed on there as long as they could. So for example, if I had more questions, we would extend it to maybe 30 to 30 to 40 minutes. So really being able to see exactly what their need was, I think is really helped and allowed me to actually get into the project quicker. So a lot of them I would start that day or that night to really just hone in on what I needed to do and really take tabs on everything I needed to do. So I think it really created a sense of efficiency.
And again, part of the trick is how do you make it as easy as possible for hiring managers so they're getting value, but still creating value for you all as career launchers. And Adil, a slight twist on this tied to a question that came through the chat. One of the participants talked about the fact that the connection to the employer and the behind the scenes access is super valuable and important. And the project is almost secondary, and that's something we see, like the project is still valuable, it's still giving the hiring manager that immediate benefit, but it's also letting companies identify, engage, assess fit, and letting you as students identify and engage and assess if the company's the right fit or learn about new roles. um, any thoughts on that, given you sort of have seen both sides of it?
Yeah, so luckily enough, I went through the onboarding process with the Sports Innovation Lab twice. So I went through with the micro-internship and then with my full time position currently. And the micro-internship process was a lot quicker than the regular job onboarding process. So I was very appreciative of that. And then, like Legend was saying, my hiring manager, the person that over the intern manager, she was so efficient in everything that she was doing. She had it all laid out for me the second that I walked in. So I really didn't have to have any hiccups. We took time more on the call to make that personal connection because she had already planned out everything. So that was beneficial for me because I felt very comfortable with going to her for any types of questions that I had, even though she outlined it all, didn't really have a lot. But that was making that personal connection and taking that time. Like Legend was saying, she would stay on the phone call for as long as I needed to talk about anything, whether that be her experience, the company itself, or just possible things that, like, goals that I had for myself and that she could help me through, even after the micro internship. So that was very good and beneficial to be able to make that personal connection. I think it's really worth it.
And that keeps on coming back. Again, how do you develop these authentic, real personal connections between prospective candidates for internships or full-time roles and employees and current employees, hiring managers? How do you build it? And it's difficult enough in a traditional environment at info sessions or events or other things where, again, the data shows a lot of times those things don't work as well as one expects, especially tied to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and people who don't have the social capital at some of those events. But it's especially true, obviously, during COVID. How do you create those authentic engagements so that both companies and students can determine if it's the right role for them, or to learn about different roles and build the relationships? As we're approaching the top of the hour, I guess I would ask each of you, given, again, this is sort of a unique opportunity for employers to hear directly from students, what advice would you give to the employers on the call? Like, if they could take away one key piece of advice from you, from your learnings, and one key actionable item, what would it be? And Yashin, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think my advice would be to reiterate a point that I had brought up a bit earlier, which is just to find more ways that make it easy for us to continue building a connection with you, and to put that into more tangible terms. For example, when I'm trying to think of ways to connect with someone that I'm reaching out to, there's no better way than for me to think of a past conversation I've had with somebody that they might know at the company, or maybe bring up an experience that I've had, like working with them or doing some sort of interactive program. Just to contrast, for example, I've tried bringing up experiences at info sessions or memorable things I've read on their websites or at a career fair, but that never is able to go much deeper than that in the conversation. And I feel like having more different opportunities that the company provides are really helpful to building a stronger relationship long term. As another example, like I feel like I've been going to info sessions for certain companies in person over at least a couple years, but I did not develop as strong of a relationship as I did with the people that I met at Parker Dewey that was completely virtual and also over a much shorter period of time.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that. Adila, what's your sort of big advice or takeaway for the employers on the call?
I would say just dig a little deeper. Look a little bit further past the resume. And if you don't feel comfortable and you think it's too risky, then put a position out on Parker Dewey. Do a micro internship and then utilize this as a way to, I guess you could say, test people and see like, hey, we think that this person might be a great candidate, but we don't necessarily want to offer them a full-time position yet because we don't know based on their experience whether or not they're qualified, but we can offer them a small Parker Dewey internship so that we could see, hey, are they qualified? Are they not? But definitely just digging a little deeper and personalizing the experience, because we as individuals and as recent grads, we are looking for jobs to then, project the rest of our lives. We're not looking for a job to just have one. This is going to set us up for our futures. So we will do anything that's necessary to make sure that that job is a success. So if these employers don't feel like it's, or they might feel that it's too risky to just look at a resume and say, okay, you don't have experience, that's fine. I think this is a great opportunity for them to test it out and take that risk.
No, and I love that. And beyond the fact I'm biased towards micro internships, obviously, I love that because what it also does is it helps the university recruiters almost retrain the hiring manager. The hiring manager that said we only hire 3.9s from a certain school or only hire marketing majors for marketing roles. This helps them see that students, irrespective of where they go to university or background or major or GPA, can do the role and can start to break down those biases and traditions. Legend, last and again, certainly not least, big takeaway for the employers on the call or piece of advice?
I would say just keep an open mind. Realize that your current strategy may not always work, and that's okay. I would say it's actually riskier to not do something such as a micro internship than kind of doing currently what you're doing right now. And I would say it's a very good way to basically do some pre-screening and to really see firsthand what your diversity initiatives are going to be like, or how they can even improve, and see the potential talent pool that's coming in. If I'm a company and I do a micro internship and I work with 10 students, it can really give me a glimpse into what what we're currently doing right now and what we can do to further improve that. And like you said, it kind of takes down those biases and those barriers. So I think it's really up to them really having an open mind.
Well, and your point about diversity is really interesting. I dropped something in the chat because we didn't have a chance to get to it. We've been seeing some really interesting programs that companies are doing to engage their ERG or BRG teams with micro interns on these short-term projects, and sort of the impact on diversity, both with their campus recruiting initiatives, but also with their existing talent pool. With that, we're at the top of the hour. Huge thank you to all three of you. All three of you are absolutely amazing. I mean, we've worked obviously with thousands and thousands and thousands of college students. And the three of you really have just shown, again, why we started Parker Dewey, why companies sort of should be leveraging micro internships, your passion for career exploration, your passion for finding the right role, your willingness to share your time and advice. Just thank you so much to all of you. To anyone else, again, thank you so much for joining us here. If you have other questions or need any help in any way, please let us know. With that, this concludes the webinar. Have a wonderful rest of your week.